Okay, this is video number 3, and what I'm going to be doing is actually putting the examples up here on the screen so you can see. Please understand that they're mere examples. I created them, and I created them sort of on a whim. So do not sit there and I do not recommend that you cannibalize anything that I throw up. I'm merely using this as an example of what I recommend. Now, why do I recommend this? Because in many parts of the country where there is not going to be a state shutdown of the schools, okay? Individual schools will be doing modified days. They're going to be, you know, shifting days depending on your last name in the alphabet. 2 days, 1 day off, other days of virtual learning. So there's going to be a myriad of options and delivery paths that schools are going to be trying to implement. If the state starts the school year to where they're shutting all the schools down, then you're back to distant learning, the same situation we had in the spring. And at that point, the standard of a FAPE is still there. They're required to provide your child with a free and appropriate public education. At the same time, they can't provide your child necessarily with a FAPE. So it becomes individualized, but it's still on a good faith effort type of standard, just like with the spring. Now, that means that it's highly likely that your child's entitled to recovery services, compensatory services, because of the limitations and the inability of your school system to be able to provide a FAPE because the state government shut the schools down. Now, if the state government does not have, and this is going to be the majority of the states in this country, okay, where the governor did not shut the schools down like they did in the spring. And then it becomes an individual school district decision. And if the individual school has made a decision to close and go with virtual learning for let's say the first 9 weeks, then at that point, there was no health order restricting that. Now, it's not discriminatory because they're treating all students the same, you see. So don't sit there and say, oh, that's discriminatory. No. But what it is it's a potential violation of your child's ability to receive a free and appropriate public education. Now, why is that? Because there's no state order restricting the school. They're making a decision to close their doors. Could they offer services to students with special needs, for example, in a one-to-one setting? Yes, they could. There's going to be plenty of teachers out there, guys. I'm not forcing teachers back to work. There are going to be plenty of teachers that are going to be more than willing to return to work in a safe environment, okay? And individual services can be done safely. They can. And there's a lot of kids out there with IEPs that are just not distant learners. They're not. Mine included. So in those situations, regardless if the school says, well, we're going to go with virtual learning for everybody, doesn't mean that they're under any kind of state mandate that prohibits them from doing it, which means that they could do it. They can do it. They have the resources to do it. And if they choose still not to do it, it doesn't absolve them of their legal responsibility, which means that if there are private facilities that are open, that can do it, that will do it, then the school system needs to open that checkbook, okay? And if they won't do it, if they will not do it for you guys, then I'm telling you, your only option is to file a due process complaint. I know that sucks, but some of these schools are they're going to go, well, that was the local school board decision. Sorry. Just because the local school board made that decision doesn't mean that it was the right decision, doesn't mean that there's not flexibility, doesn't mean that they don't need to think outside the box. There's not a lot of direction being provided from the state education agencies or the federal education. We've never gone through this before. So don't sit there and assume that your local school board is making the correct decision and couldn't do other things. Also, do not forget that they are receiving additional federal funds because of this catastrophe. So, they can do it, okay? Your IEP team can do it. So, what do I recommend? I don't care if you're an administrator, if you're a teacher, if you're a parent watching this, this is what I recommend. This is what I recommend. Everything's so haphazard, guys. Everybody doesn't know what the plan is, what we need to do, what we can't do, what we should do. I'm giving you a calm, common sense approach, and then you can sit there from this approach, pivot this way, go this way, this way. You have a myriad of options in front of you. Calm down. Okay? Oh, hold on, let me get that. Yeah. Oh no, I'm recommending that they calm down, sir. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Take a chill pill. Yes, I'm advising them all to do that as well. But I appreciate the concern, and I am about to go in with the explanations. Yeah. Oh yeah, those. Yeah, the ones that we discussed. Sure. Okay. You too. All right. Okay, so simple as that. I don't want to tell you who that was. It just, okay, look, and some of you guys, God, that was horrible shtick. I know. Okay, so this is an example, and this is what I recommend first and foremost, guys, is that you create a traditional IEP. This would be a traditional IEP. All right, now this is an Alabama IEP. So if you're in another state watching this, it really doesn't matter. The format is going to be different. The content the same. So as you can see, this parent provided permission for me to be able to do this, and I redacted the names. But please understand that this IEP is created for a traditional school environment. A traditional school environment. Okay? So please bear that in mind. So that's how I recommend that you start the school year. And on the services page, there's a lot of goals. So on the services page, for example, okay, as you can see, the amount of time devoted for each goal is written right here, daily for this amount of time. In a general education or the resource setting, as you can see, it's created for a traditional school setting, along with the supplemental aids and services, along with the related services, ABA therapy, speech language, occupational therapy. It's all in there, as though the child was going to school in a traditional fashion. Okay? Now you sit there and you go, okay, I get that. So create a normal IEP. That's what I recommend. Well, why is that? Because that normal IEP is what a FAPE is. This is what a free and appropriate public education is that IEP. That is your base. Because at some point during the 2021 school year, guys, your child, you've got to think positive. You've got to think that at some point we will return to a normal school schedule or close to it. Now, they should really go extra effort for the students with special needs with regards to returning to normalcy before anybody else, because they have a legal duty to those children in the form of a free and appropriate public education. But if you create a foundation as an IEP team that this is what a free and appropriate public education is for this child, then at that point, do you understand that you can build anything on top of it? Because this is your base. This is an acknowledgement by the team that legally this is what needs to happen in order for your child to receive a FAPE. All right. So you sit there and you go, okay, well, the school system shut down, and decided, not because of the state health order, but let's say Mobile made a decision to go virtual learning for all students. Well, there's no state health order prohibiting the school to reopen. That was just a decision by the local school board. Okay, that's fine. But that doesn't impede the child's right to a free and appropriate public education. Could Mobile provide in-person services to their special populations? Absolutely, they could. And if they choose not to, okay, then are there private facilities, private tutors that could be paid to be able to provide those services in a safe environment and in a safe manner? Absolutely. And so therefore, in that situation, the IEP teams are going to have to figure that out. And the school system is going to have to sit there and have some flexibility for a segment of their student population that are at risk of not benefiting from distant learning, which would be a violation of a free and appropriate public education. All right. So if you look at this, after you create your base IEP, guys, then all of a sudden you have your prior written notice. And your prior written notice, depending on what state you live in, is going to look a little bit different. This is an Alabama prior written notice. So if you see, I made up the student's name as Charlie Button. And I hate Grandpa Joe. Yes, I want to go ahead and put that out there. Never really liked Grandpa Joe. IEP team created traditional IEP that offers Charlie a free, appropriate public education for the 2021 school year. The parent has opted to start the 2021 school year using a distant learning plan with the developed IEP available to be for implementation upon Charlie's return. Parent will inform district when Charlie will transition to regular school participation. Now that's the decision. After the IEP is made, then at that point the parent can sit there and say, well, I know that this is what FAPE is, but the parent says, I'm opting temporarily for distant learning, let's say, virtual learning. You still have what everybody, the team, is acknowledging is a free and appropriate public education. The parent is opting for something less than that, which is fine. Because that's the reality of it. If the school system cannot provide your child with a free and appropriate public education in a distant learning format, and this is the only way that your child can truly benefit legally, then anything that you're opting for through parent choice is going to be less than FAPE. Okay? Which you get to make that decision. Now, if you, let's say, live in Mobile, then guys, or a place where they're doing closure for everybody, I'm still recommending that you create a base IEP. And if the school is at that point going to sit there and say, nah, we don't care. We're doing distant learning for her. Then guys, you're boxed in a corner. You can either take it or not. And when I say take it, meaning, you're just going to have to just acknowledge that they got one over on you and that your child's not going to receive a FAPE for that period of time until they reopen schools. Your only other option is to file a due process complaint, to file for mediation, to use somebody like me to be able to help you out. My attitude in the spring has changed because there is no state health order shutting the schools down, depending on the state. And Alabama hasn't done that yet. So therefore, it's an individual local school board issue where they do have the capability to provide a FAPE just through alternative means. Okay? And just saying that you're all going to do virtual learning is lazy, and that's not a FAPE when alternatives exist. And yeah, you might have to pay for those alternatives if you're choosing not to be flexible. But you're not going to see me having any pity on you. Okay, so the basis for decision in the prior written notice is due to the prolonged disruption of services because of COVID-19, the IEP team conducted updated evaluations to determine current levels of functioning and gauge regression, recoupment of lost skills. It is a consensus of the IEP team that a traditional in-school IEP would be developed for the 2021 school year that is designed to provide Charlie with a FAPE, as his learning style, deficits, and needs are such that in-person services are required for a FAPE. If the state government or Board of Education suspend in-school services and close school campuses, the IEP team will reconvene to amend the developed IEP accordingly. The parent has opted to start school with virtual services. Now, guys, I wrote this part before I found out that Mobile had decided that it wanted to go virtual learning for everything. After thinking about it, yes, I have in there that if the local school board, I still don't think that anything needs to be amended. I still believe that you should be creating your base IEP regardless, because that's going to be a temporary closure, even if the local school board does it. Okay, so that aspect, I should have removed that. But if the state government shuts down the school, then that's a little different situation. Okay. So the last one, the distant learning services were considered but rejected because of the district's inability to provide Charlie with a FAPE using distant learning format. Now, why did I put that in there? Guys, because you don't have the legal duty as a parent. The school system has the legal duty, not you. You can sit there during this flexible time period, opt for an alternative, but you can't sit there and force the school system to acquiesce legally to your whims when it has the legal duty and you don't. That creates an imbalance in this relationship to where the parent becomes the impediment. And I've had many, many cases to where the parent is the impediment to the school system's ability to provide a child with a FAPE. And in those situations, a school system, it happens rarely, but a school system has filed due process against my clients because, let's say, they refuse to sign consent for evaluations. Well, you can't impede a school system's duty legally to provide your child with a FAPE. And if they want to do updated evaluations because they believe legitimately that they need those updated evaluations in order to provide your child with a FAPE, then that's what it is, guys. You cannot be an impediment to the school district's legal responsibility because they have 100% of it. You do not. And that's why in this situation, if your child is one to where the learning style, they're just not going to progress. They're not going to be able to provide a FAPE, and they're not going to be able to receive a FAPE in a distant learning format. Then if the school's dumb enough not to do what I'm recommending, then they get what's coming to them. Okay, and they can sit there and roll the dice on due process complaints and trying to prove that somehow distant learning was. And if they want to, they can sit there and try to spout off excuses like, well, we closed the schools. Well, was there a state health mandate that you do so? No. Could you have opened up a classroom and done so safely? Well, I guess. Did you have teachers willing to provide service? Well, yeah, we did, but, were there tutoring options, private facilities open, therapeutic settings that could have provided speech language or in-service tutoring or assistance? Well, yeah. None of those places closed down. Were there private schools that closed down, that the therapeutic placements that these children could have gone to? Well, yeah, I guess. So you see where then we get into the nitty-gritty of the excuses. Wasn't a state mandated health shutdown. It was a local board decision, but yet other options within the LEA, the local education agency, were open. Those resources were available, which means the school has two options. They can either provide the services to your child in the way, in the manner in which they learn, or they can opt to pay for it within the community where those services remain open and willing to be provided. You're not stuck with a distant learning plan only. They may tell you that. They may claim that. They may be real confident in it. But this is where, I'm sorry, you just need to call us if you live in a state where we practice, because that's just not right. But that's the reason I put that sentence in there like that, is that there needs to be a statement that the IEP team acknowledges that it cannot provide your child a FAPE in a distant learning format. And that's why you created the base IEP. And then if you want in-person services, then you need to figure out how to get those. But if you are a parent that is opting to delay, let's say an in-person start, then at that point you do need a distant learning plan. But like I had said before, this alternative is not FAPE. It's your choice. I don't care what reason you have. It could be a very legitimate reason. And I'm sure it's a very legitimate reason. But as I said, the law has no emotion. The law just is. Okay? So what was, the final example is I had an example of a distant learning plan, you see. So this would be the option that the parent chose. But I also believe that in a distant learning plan, you just sort of need to create some redundancy with explanation in the future of why you developed a temporary DLP, that you did develop a traditional IEP, that it was designed to provide Charlie with a FAPE, but it will be implemented upon his return, and that the case manager will be responsible for communicating with the parent on coordinated and ensuring all necessary technology and equipment is available and operational, including any login information and learning schedule. Parent agrees to keep the school staff informed when and if Charlie is to resume in-school participation. The parent agrees to provide sufficient notice so the district can ensure materials and support staff are in place so the developed IEP can be implemented upon his return, and the IEP team agrees to convene within 10 school days to discuss any needed changes or amendments to that IEP that you guys developed, let's say now. All right? So I just came up with a BS schedule that I pulled out of thin air. So let's say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, where you have your regular Zoom classrooms, distant instruction with, the class schedule or design lesson plans provided in advance so the parents have them available for the child during the distant instruction. And then I have the specialized instruction being provided on a different days, alternating days during a different time format. And that the asterisk is that the reading and math will be based upon developed IEP goals to the extent practicable and utilizing a peer-reviewed web-based reading and math program. And I put in examples Key Math or Spire. And then with the related services, I put in there alumatherapy.com. Now you sit there and go, well, what's alumatherapy? Well, I put that in there because the schools that are going to, let's say, remain open, they may not necessarily have OTs and speech language pathologists that are going to be doing virtual OT and speech. So with some additional funding, I do think schools should reserve the time for the speech language and the OT if they are returning to school, but you've opted for distant learning so that the resources are saved for the kids at school, but your child's still receiving their related services through teletherapy, and alumatherapy.com, they offer those services. And then let's say for this particular kid, behavior therapy in a virtual format, or if the clinic is open, which most are, then the school district will pay for one time per week for 60 minutes in the in-clinic setting. So that's a distant learning plan example. Okay. Now, does it provide a FAPE? No, no. As you can see, there was far more meat in this IEP, with regards to purpose in what they could do logically within the school environment. But the distant learning plan is that option for the parent to be able to be provided, but it's still not that same standard of FAPE. Okay. Please distinguish between the two. This is what FAPE is. This is what FAPE is. Distant learning is just an alternative to try to get you back to this point. But you need a foundation so that you can pivot at that point, because there's going to be a lot of changes. But if you create a base, then at that point you can return to it. And if at some point, closures happen again, do you see where you can sit there and make adjustments? It allows that flexibility while still having the IEP team in control of this is what FAPE is. You don't want to get into the business of trying to figure out what FAPE is in a distant learning format, because that's not FAPE. That's not FAPE. This isn't forever. This is FAPE. A traditional in-school, in-person school format, that's what a free and appropriate public education is. This is a temporary solution. But under that temporary solution, guys, so many schools are they're just going to be on the hook for recovery or compensatory services. They're not necessarily going to volunteer to you that your child's owed those services. You may have to legally challenge them to get them. I wish that the fall wasn't turning out like this. But this is what I recommend to get you to that point. Now, I was going to mention, for those children, and there's not going to be a lot of them comparative to the millions that have IEPs, but those that the child themselves are medically compromised, immunocompromised, to where they're in a high-risk group with this virus. That's a different situation, guys. And if there's medical recommendations and medical mandates, then at that point, the IEP team has to develop the IEP based upon the child's circumstances at the time. And the child's circumstances are that the medical recommendations recommend that the child not be in a traditional school setting. So that creates a necessity to create an IEP based upon, let's say, homebound services. Now, I have not made that comparison with the distant learning plan, because we're not changing the child's placement, guys. We're just serving the child in an alternative temporary place because of COVID. Now, yes, the child that is medically high risk, that has medical recommendations, it could be because of COVID. Yes, that's true, but it is different. And so therefore, the designing of the plan would be a homebound developed IEP, and it would change the child's placement, whereas it wouldn't for the other situations. If it's a parent option, because they're granting parent options, we're not changing the child's placement. The child's placement, once the child returns to school, is going to be exactly what it's supposed to be with regards to FAPE. If the parent shows up with documentation, medical documentation, and the IEP team looks at it and says, yes, your child is medically fragile, if you want to say that, or high risk, therefore the IEP team needs to develop the IEP and service the IEP like we would any homebound student, which would then result in a change in placement. And that could last longer, for example, than it would for those of you opting for a distant learning plan. Okay, because for kids that are in high risk categories, for adults in high risk categories, I don't know when it's going to be safe for them to return. I think for everybody else, it's less about safety and more about a lack of consensus and a lack of, agreement among policymakers and medical science. I don't trust them. I mean, there just hasn't been. I'm talking about politicians. I'm talking about the inconsistencies in medical science. So I get everybody's concerns. I have those too. Who are you to believe? So, but understand that that's a difference. Those that are in higher risk, I don't have a clue. So therefore, you might as well, with the medical recommendations, it should be treated as a change in placement. But that would be it. And I know that this was detailed, and thanks for hanging with me on this. I hope that these examples helped, but this is going to help safeguard your IEP team. Don't play games with your school, guys. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend those of you that, want to try to go to your doctor, and let's say your child isn't really high risk, but you want to try to get some documentation to try to play that game. I don't recommend it. Don't recommend you play games with your least restrictive environment. You're with your LRE. Don't recommend it. This is a complicated area of law, but understand it's not at the same time, but there are consequences for trying to play chess with people who know how to play chess, and you are really good at checkers, and you just started picking up the game of chess, but you're not an expert in it. There's a lot of parents that make that mistake. And, I know how to play chess. I know how to play checkers too. But I'm just saying, I don't recommend you playing chess with these people. And also those of you that are in school administration, don't recommend screwing with parents on any of this. It's just not worth it. You guys are going to get absolutely hammered. There's going to be a 2-year statute of limitations as well, unless the government comes in and at some later date shocks the hell out of us and removes those kind of penalties on schools. But there's a 2-year statute of limitations that exists currently in most states, 1 year in North Carolina and Texas. Okay? But don't be surprised if you start getting hit with due process complaint. I highly suspect it. And I am proud of parents for delaying and having that patience and trying to work with the schools through this. That's commendable. But I don't have any pity on schools. Staff, yes. Board of Education administrators, there are simple solutions. I presented this solution. And you're not going to have a lot of guidance. And you're not going to be popular. You're going to have half of the parents that are screaming at you, well, what are you, insane, wanting to kill all of our students and kill the teachers? I've heard that insanity. I mean, it's absolutely irrational thinking. At the same time, whatever. I mean, we're dealing with kids. I get it. But at the same time, you also have the other voice that's saying that our kids desperately need to be in school. Our kids desperately need social interaction. Our kids, there's a balance we need to strike. Now, the voices being listened to, whatever voices those are, it's going to be the loudest voices. And it's typically going to fall on erring on the side of caution. Why? Because we're dealing with politicians. And, the worst possible combination, I hope that this has taught everybody, is you don't mix medical science and the inconsistencies that have been going on there with politicians who are in control of making policy decisions based upon incomplete, ever-changing, educated guesses. Got it? That's it's a recipe for disaster, as we're seeing. Okay. Hope this helped.